So this is Rick Ross. And apparently he was on his way to Colombia. Now, if you don't know, Rick Ross owns a plane.
It's all good. Heading back to New York. Let's go Knicks.
I'm at the #1 dentist in the game, and what I want to do is I want to give back.
Rick Ross got caught hiding at an airport terminal, not chilling in a private hangar, not boarding a G650 with a glass of champagne, hiding, pulled his hoodie up, tucked himself into a corner, and tried to disappear before the cameras could find him. They found him anyway, and what they captured next has set off one of the wildest financial firestorms hip-hop has seen in years. The man who has spent 2 decades telling the world he is the biggest boss you have ever seen was photographed squeezing himself into an economy seat on a Frontier Airlines flight. Frontier, not Delta First Class, not even Delta Comfort. Frontier, the same airline that charges you extra to choose your seat and serves you nothing but a memory of a snack you saw on a real airline. And the second those photos hit the internet, the entire narrative around Rosie flipped overnight. Suddenly people were not arguing about his bars or his catalog or his place in the Maybach music legacy. They were asking one question: is Rick Ross actually running out of money? Because here is what we know. The Frontier footage is real. The watch experts are still picking apart his jewelry frame by frame. The Port of Miami tour is moving slower than anyone expected. And 50 Cent, the one man in the industry who has built half his personality around dunking on Rosie, is sitting back, watching all of it unfold and feeding the internet like a chef on Sunday dinner. The shocking part is not that the broke rumor started. The shocking part is how much actual evidence the internet has been able to stack up. And we are going to walk through every single piece of it because this story is way deeper than one viral photo. So lock in.
Yo, what's happening? It's the biggest boss in the game, Ricky Rose, right here live with Rob Report.
Sorry, that's funny. Ricky Rose, brother.
The Frontier moment landed like a punchline written by the universe itself. Reports from people inside that terminal describe Ross trying to keep a low profile in the boarding area, hood up, head down, doing everything he could to not become content. It did not work. Phones came out, the clips went up, and within hours, the man who has been rapping about chartering jets to Dubai was trending for sitting in seat 23B on a discount carrier. The irony is what made it lethal. Just days before that video surfaced, Rosie had been on social media clowning 50 Cent and the G-Unit camp, calling them broke, telling the world he was operating on a different financial frequency. So when his own footage came out showing him in coach on Frontier of all airlines, the internet did not just laugh. It feasted. Memes started flying within minutes. Every rapper with a public beef history dropped their 2 cents. And then came Ross's response, which somehow made the situation worse. He came out and said, and I am paraphrasing here so y'all understand, that he chose to fly commercial because his private jet was getting upgraded with Starlink internet, and he was heading to Colombia anyway, so it just made sense. Nothing wrong with that, right? People who own jets fly commercial sometimes. Schedules get weird. Maintenance happens. But the way the internet received that explanation tells you everything about where Rosie's credibility sits right now. Nobody bought it. The comment sections turned into a comedy show. Because when you have built an entire brand around the idea that private aviation is your default mode of transportation, you cannot suddenly pivot to "I chose Frontier" and expect anyone to nod along seriously. And that is the part that should sit with everybody for a second. Whether the Starlink upgrade story is true or not almost does not matter anymore. The damage was already done. The image of Rosie tucked into a Frontier seat is now permanently burned into the cultural memory. Every time he posts a flex from this point forward, that Frontier photo is the first reply. That is what happens when one piece of evidence cracks the foundation. Everything built on top of it starts to wobble. But the airport drama was just the appetizer. Because while the internet was still digesting that meal, an entirely different storm was already brewing around his wrist.
And for the little fat guy in the one cubicle office speaking on watches, speaking on Rick Ross and his Audemars, stay out of grown folks' business, little piglet. Get out of that one cubicle office and go and see the world. Audemars.
The watch situation hits different because the watch community does not play. These people analyze timepieces with the precision of forensic investigators. Frame by frame, dial by dial, bezel by bezel. And when one of the most respected voices in that world pointed his camera at Rick Ross's prized $3.5 million emerald Audemars Piguet Royal Oak and said it was not what Ross claimed it was, the whole jewelry conversation around Rosie went up in flames. The expert in question was Nico van der Horst, a luxury watch authority who has built a serious following calling out counterfeit pieces. He went through Ross's emerald AP piece by piece, the dial details, the case finishing, the way the emeralds were set, the bracelet construction, and his conclusion was not subtle. According to him, what Ross was wearing and presenting to the world as a multi-million-dollar Audemars Piguet was a counterfeit or at minimum, not what it was being represented as. Rosie's response was the same playbook he uses for everything. Deflect, dismiss, and attack. He fired back at the watch expert, called him piglet, dared people to bring receipts. But here is where Rosie made the same mistake he made with the airport situation. He did not actually address the technical claims. He did not show paperwork. He did not pull receipts from a verified Audemars Piguet dealer. He did not produce a serial number or authentication papers. He just dunked on the messenger and hoped the audience would move on. The watch community did not move on. They never do. There has been some debate inside the watch world about whether the piece in question might be a real royal oak that was custom modified with aftermarket emerald studding, which would technically not be an authentic AP factory piece, but also not exactly a counterfeit in the way most people understand that word. That is a meaningful distinction in the watch world. But for the broader internet audience that is not parsing those nuances, the headline became simple. Ross's watch might be fake. And once that headline existed, it joined the frontier footage in the growing case file the internet has been building. Now picture what this does to every other flex in Rosie's catalog. The cars in his driveway, the chains around his neck, the mansion he flies drones over, the diamonds on his fingers. Every single piece of public wealth is now sitting under a microscope it has never been under before. Once doubt enters the conversation, it does not leave quietly. And the next chapter of this story is what really made people start whispering that something deeper might actually be going on.
I'm your host, the biggest boss, Ricky Rose. Come with me.
The tour numbers are where this stops being internet speculation and starts becoming a conversation about real money. Because here is the truth about how artists at Rosie's level make a living in 2026. Album sales are a memory. Streaming pays pennies unless you are Drake or Taylor Swift. The actual paycheck, the one that keeps a private jet fueled and a mansion staff employed, comes from touring. Live shows, bodies in seats. That is where the math has to work. Rosie launched his Port of Miami 20th anniversary tour with a clear concept. Celebrate the album that introduced him to the world. Bring the orchestra. Make it a black tie experience. Hit major venues across the country. The packaging looked premium. The promotional rollout was significant. And then the ticket sales reports started coming in. Ticketmaster. Word from inside the touring industry has been that the tour has struggled in markets where it should have walked. Including, and this is the part that stings, Miami. His home base, the city that the album is literally named after. When fans on Reddit and across social media started posting screenshots showing wide-open seating maps in cities where Rosie should be selling out without breaking a sweat, the financial questions got louder. Some dates have reportedly seen ticket prices drop significantly in the days leading up to the show, which is the move promoters make when they are trying to fill seats by any means necessary. There was also that earlier moment that everyone remembers, the footage of Ross performing to what looked like an almost empty venue. His team came out and clarified that the show in question was actually a private corporate gig contracted for around 100 to 150 guests, not a failed public concert. Fair enough. TMZ confirmed that side of the story. TMZ, but here's the problem. Once the empty venue clip was out in the world, the explanation never traveled as fast as the original visual. Millions of people saw the empty room. A fraction of those people saw the correction. And that imbalance is exactly the territory Rosie keeps finding himself in. Now let me put the touring math in plain English. A major artist on the road carries massive overhead. Crew, production, venue guarantees, transportation, hotels, insurance. If the ticket revenue does not clear those costs, the tour is not less profitable, it is hemorrhaging money. And when you add up the Port of Miami sales reports with the previous empty room visual with the broader narrative everybody is already chewing on, the touring branch of the Rose financial tree starts looking a lot less healthy than it used to. 50 Cent has been watching this part especially closely, because touring numbers are the kind of receipt that is hard to fake, hard to spin, and easy to verify. And when the numbers come in soft, he is right there to make sure everyone notices.
I got a 1.
Look at that. That mean dick. That mean you automatically pay and you pay twice.
The tax trail is the part of his story that does not depend on grainy airport footage or watch expert opinions. The tax trail is on paper, with dates, with dollar amounts, with government agencies attached to them, and it tells a story all by itself. Late in 2023, the state of Georgia filed a tax execution against William Leonard Roberts II. The amount in question was $64,995.21, tied to unpaid 2021 taxes, including penalties, interest, and collection fees. The Georgia Department of Revenue does not file paperwork like that for fun. They file it after multiple attempts to collect have not landed. $65,000 sounds like couch cushion money for a man who flies private and owns Wingstops by the dozen. And that is exactly the point. That number is small enough that any artist with healthy cash flow should be cutting that check the same week. The fact that it sat unpaid long enough for the state to file public collection paperwork is the part that raises eyebrows. Because it is not the size of the bill that tells the story. It is the fact that it was not handled. And this is not even the first time the tax man and Rosie have crossed paths. Years earlier, the IRS hit him with a lien that eventually grew to a reported $5.7 million in back taxes. Ross publicly blamed that one on an incorrect filing and his team's accounting issues. Rolling Stone eventually, he dropped around $4.6 million to clear the lien, which technically means he handled it. But it also means there was a multi-year window where the federal government was publicly chasing him for an enormous sum of money. When you line those two situations up next to each other, the IRS situation from years ago and the Georgia situation from 2023, the pattern starts to take shape. This is not a man who accidentally forgot to mail a check once. This is a recurring rhythm of tax issues that has shown up across different jurisdictions across different years. And patterns like that in the financial world almost always point to something deeper. Cash flow management problems, liquidity issues, tension between what is coming in and what is going out. Now, if all of that was the entire picture, the broke narrative would be airtight. But it is not the entire picture. And in fairness to Rosie, the other side of the ledger deserves its time on stage too.
I'm your host, the biggest boss, Ricky Rose. Come with me.
Here's where things get complicated, because everything we just walked through, the frontier flight, the watch situation, the tour drama, the tax filings, all of it is real. And at the same time, the other half of Rosie's financial picture is also real. And it is significantly bigger than people give him credit for. The Wingstop empire alone is a serious operation. Ross has been a Wingstop franchisee for years, and at this point owns somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 locations depending on which year's count you trust. Yahoo Finance, that is not a side hustle. That is a multi-unit restaurant business that generates real, consistent, taxable revenue independent of his music career. He has also been involved with Checkers and various other franchise ventures. The man understands the franchise game in a way most rappers never bother to learn. Then there is the real estate. The Fayetteville, Georgia estate is one of the largest privately owned residential properties in the state. It has its own infrastructure, its own ecosystem. And every June, Rosie throws an annual car and bike show on the grounds that draws thousands of people. The 2025 edition was the 4th annual run and reportedly brought in around 8,000 attendees, with vendor markets, food trucks, and a level of operational sophistication that costs serious money to execute. WSBTV, a man who is genuinely tapped out, cannot host 8,000 people at his house and pull it off cleanly. Maybach Music Group is still active. The label moved over to Gamma as its distribution partner back in 2023, which kept the operation alive in the modern industry framework. Wikipedia, the catalog, still streams. Royalties still flow. New music still gets released under the MMG banner. The The label may not be hitting the peaks it hit during the Meek Mill and Whale era, but it is not dormant either. And then there is the net worth number that keeps getting tossed around in mainstream finance coverage. Most major outlets put Rosie somewhere between $150 million and $180 million as of late 2025 and into 2026. Celebrity net worth now. Net worth figures for celebrities are notoriously squishy. They are often based on estimates of asset value rather than verified financial statements. But even if those numbers are inflated by half, you are still looking at someone with significant wealth. So which version is true? The man whose tour is soft and who flies Frontier and owes Georgia tax money? Or the man with the Wingstop empire and the mansion and the 9-figure net worth? The honest answer is that both versions can be true at the same time. And that is the part that makes this whole conversation so fascinating. Being asset rich and cash poor is a real condition that affects many wealthy people. You can own $10 million worth of real estate and $12 million worth of franchises and still struggle to liquidate quickly when the bills come due. And that gap between paper wealth and liquid wealth might be exactly where Rosie is currently sitting. Which brings us to the man who has been waiting his entire career for this exact moment.
What's happening? It's the biggest boss in the game, Rick Ross, live from Wingstop in Brooklyn, and you checking out Forbes.com.
Oh, 50 Cent did not create the financial questions around Rick Ross. The internet did, the receipts did, but what 50 has done, and what he does better than almost anyone alive, is amplify those questions into a permanent cultural conversation. The man has turned trolling into an art form, and Rosie has been his primary canvas for over 15 years. To understand why 50's involvement in this current moment hits so hard, you have to understand the foundation his own brand sits on. 50 Cent's wealth, unlike a lot of what gets claimed in hip-hop, is publicly documented in ways that are extremely difficult to dispute. The vitamin water situation alone is one of the most famous business deals in music history. 50 took an equity stake in the company instead of an upfront paycheck, and when Coca-Cola bought Glasso for $4.1 billion in 2007, his cut was reportedly somewhere around $100 million after taxes. That is a verified, mainstream business news story, not a music industry rumor. Then came Power on Stars. Then the Power Universe expansion with Book 2, Book 3, Book 4, and the spin-offs. Then the production deal with Stars, worth significant money. Then the G-Unit film and television production company. Then the various other ventures. 50 has built a documented media empire that exists on paper at the corporate filing level. When he talks about money, the SEC could fact-check him if it wanted to. And here's the part Rosie has tried to use against him over the years. 50 famously filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2015, following a civil judgment. Wikipedia Ross has brought that filing up repeatedly, claiming that through the legal process between them, he saw 50's actual finances and discovered he was broke. That has been Rosie's go-to comeback for years. But here is what Rosie has never fully addressed. Chapter 11 is a restructuring filing, not a liquidation. It is a strategic tool that wealthy people use to manage liabilities. And in the years since that filing, 50 has only become more financially visible, more frequently in major business publications, more clearly running a documented media operation. Whatever broke moment may have been captured in that filing, the present-day evidence does not support the broke description anymore. So when 50 Cent fires shots at Rosie about being broke, the asymmetry of the situation is what makes it land. One side has receipts that are verifiable. The other side has receipts that are increasingly being questioned. That is not a fair fight in the court of public opinion. That is a slaughter. And 50 knows exactly how to weaponize that asymmetry. He does not just post about the Frontier flight. He posts about the Frontier flight, ties it to a previous Rosie claim, screenshots an old quote, layers a meme on top of it, and pushes it out at the exact moment when the algorithm is hungry for hip-hop drama. The man treats Instagram like a military operation. He picks his moments, he picks his angles, and he never lets a single piece of ammunition go to waste. Uncle Murda jumped in too, which is what happens when 50 sets the tone. The whole comedy crew piles on. Rosie's counter is to act like none of it bothers him. He posts back. He says he is unbothered. He keeps releasing content. But the difference between his counter and 50's attack is volume and saturation. 50 controls the narrative cycle. Rosie reacts to it. And in 2026, the person who controls the narrative cycle wins.
So this is Rick Ross. And apparently he was on his way to Colombia. Now, if you don't know, Rick Ross owns a plane.
What this whole situation really exposes has very little to do with whether Rick Ross has $40 in his bank account or $40 million. It is about something much bigger. It is about what happens when an entire brand is built on the projection of wealth in an era where every single projection can be verified, doubted, or torn apart in real time by an audience of millions. For decades, hip-hop ran on a beautiful kind of mythology. Rappers could be whoever they said they were. The biggest exaggerations were part of the art form. The flex was the music as much as the bars were the music, and the audience accepted it because the audience could not easily verify it. There was no way to check if a chain was real. No way to count the seats in a venue from your couch. No way to track whether a private jet was actually private. The image was the truth because nothing could prove otherwise. That entire ecosystem has collapsed. Now a frame-by-frame breakdown of a watch dial reaches 2 million viewers in a weekend. Now a phone in an airport terminal becomes evidence in a financial trial. Now a slow Tuesday night in Birmingham, Alabama, shows up as a TikTok the next morning. The mythology has nowhere to hide. And for an artist whose entire identity was built on projecting more than the receipts can support, that is an existential problem. Rick Ross is not the only rapper dealing with this. He is just the most visible one right now. Every artist of his generation who built a brand around financial mythology is now operating in an environment that punishes any gap between image and reality. The artists who survive this era will be the ones who either pivot to a more honest version of themselves or build genuine business empires that match their music. The ones who do not adapt will keep getting caught flying frontier. The hardest part for Rosie specifically is that his persona, the boss with the bigger boss above him, was always more performative than personal. He was never claiming to be a regular guy who had gotten rich. He was claiming to be the wealthiest man in the building from the moment he walked in. That is a very specific image to maintain when the building has cameras on every wall. And the man at the heart of it all keeps reminding everyone of exactly that.
Yo, what's happening? It's the biggest boss in the game, Ricky Rose, right here live with Rob Report.
Sorry, that's funny. Ricky Rose, brother.
So where does this go from here? Rosie has options, but none of them are easy, and none of them happen overnight. He can continue doing what he has been doing. Keep posting the flexes. Keep showing the cars. Keep releasing music. Keep hoping the next viral moment is one he controls instead of one that controls him. That is the path of least resistance, but it requires the cycle of negative narratives to eventually run out of fuel. And right now, the fuel keeps showing up. He can try to directly answer the financial questions with real documentation. Pull bank statements, show investment accounts, walk people through the franchise revenue, get a respected business journalist to do a deep dive. That approach could work, but it also carries enormous risk. Any gap between what he shows and what people expect could turn into a brand new round of drama. The transparency play only succeeds if the underlying picture is actually as strong as the projection. If it is not, the transparency makes things significantly worse. The third option is the hardest one. Evolve. Pivot the brand. Lean into the entrepreneur identity, the Wingstop owner, the franchise mogul, the real estate holder. Step away from the lifestyle flex content and let the actual business empire do the talking. That works for some artists. Jay-Z did a version of it. Diddy did a version of it before his own situation imploded. But pivoting at the stage of a career, after 20 years of building a specific identity, is not a switch you can just flip. It takes years. And during those years, the old image keeps getting attacked. What Rosie cannot do is make 50 Cent stop. That is the part nobody seems to fully accept. There is no payday that gets 50 to back off. There is no peace summit. There is no apology tour that resets the relationship. 50's animosity is not transactional. It has become part of his identity. As long as material exists, he will use it. As long as Rosie is in the conversation, 50 will find a way to be in the conversation right next to him with a punchline ready. The Frontier flight gave 50 a year's worth of content. The watch situation gave him another year's worth. The tour numbers will keep giving him content for as long as the tour runs. Every flex Rose posts will be reverse engineered by 50's audience for inconsistencies. That is the cost of being publicly hated by a man with a private jet, a Hollywood studio, and an internet connection.
And for the little fat guy in the one cubicle office speaking on watches, speaking on Rick Ross and his Audemir, stay out of grown folks' business, little piglet. Get out of that one cubicle office and go and see the world. Audemir.
At the end of all of this, the most uncomfortable truth might be that broke is the wrong word for what is actually happening to Rick Ross. He is not broke in the way most people understand that word. He has assets. He has businesses. He has property. He has catalog. What he might actually be, and this is the more interesting version of the story, is caught between an old image that demands constant proof and a new media environment that punishes any inconsistency. Caught between a touring economy that does not pay what it used to and a lifestyle that does not get cheaper. Caught between a competitor who refuses to let him breathe and an audience that has been trained to scrutinize every flex. That is a different kind of crisis, and honestly, it might be a more dangerous one. Because being broke is something you can recover from with a hit record or a smart investment. Being caught is something you can only escape by becoming someone different. And the version of Rick Ross that the world fell in love with, the boss with the unlimited bank, the man with the bigger boss above him, may not survive the rebrand. Or maybe Rosary surprises everyone. Maybe the Wingstops keep printing money. Maybe the next album lands. Maybe the tour finds its footing in the second leg. Maybe the watch gets authenticated. Maybe the Frontier flight becomes a forgotten meme. Hip-hop has seen artists recover from worse. The story is not finished. The chapter is just getting interesting. But for right now, in this exact moment, 50 Cent is sitting on his phone, smiling, scrolling, and getting ready to post again. The biggest boss you have ever seen is on Frontier. The watch on his wrist is being studied by strangers on the internet. The seats at his concert have empty patches the camera is trying not to show. And the man who has spent 15 years saying this moment was coming finally gets to say 4 words that he has been waiting his entire career to say. I told you so. What do you think? Is Rick Ross actually in trouble? Or is the internet doing what the internet always does, taking a few unlucky moments and turning them into a story bigger than the truth? Is 50 Cent a genius for keeping this narrative alive? Or is he obsessed with a beef nobody else cares about anymore? Drop your take in the comments. And tap the video on screen if you want to go deeper into the financial untangling of the biggest names in hip-hop, because trust me, the receipts are wilder than anyone wants to admit.